They say every town has a house people whisper about, a place kids dare each other to sprint past after dark. For me, that house was a crumbling Victorian on the east side of Portland. Gingerbread trim chewed by weather, a roofline that sagged like a tired shoulder, windows boarded and bandaged with city notices no one obeyed. I walked by it almost every day after my shift at the archive, hugging the edge of the sidewalk, faster on windy afternoons when the cedars hissed. I never thought I would be the one to learn its secret. It was a cold, colorless Thursday, the sky the dull side of a spoon. Damp air carried that metallic scent right before rain finally commits. I'd stayed late, cataloging a box of estate letters, the paper whispery and soft with age. My fingers smelled like dust and lemon balm when I cut through the neighborhood where the old house sat like a warning no one took down. The side gate was open. It hung crooked on one hinge, creaking faintly in the breeze. Behind it, the yard had gone feral, waist-high grass, blackberry vines looping like ropes, a kiddie pool half sunken in the earth and full of leaves that looked fossilized. Something in me paused. In animal sense, I usually obeyed, but curiosity leaned shoulder into my back. I slid the gate with 2 fingers. The wood felt soft, like a bruise. My sneakers whispered through wet grass toward the back steps. The paint on the door had peeled in scabs, sun-bleached to a pale green. The knob turned, unlocked. My stomach dropped the way it does on the first dip of a roller coaster no one forced you to ride. I pushed the door with my palm, and the house exhaled, cold, damp, and a little sweet, like forgotten fruit. Inside, light worked hard to exist. It slid through slats of broken blinds, striping the floor in gray. Wallpaper curled away from plaster like old petals. A chair lay on its side. A ceiling stain spread like a map of sorrow. My heartbeat sounded too loud in the soft echo of empty rooms. The smell found me first. Not rot. This was drier, thinner, like dust with an iron aftertaste. I stepped further, the floor complaining in long, tired groans. In the far corner, where the light failed, a shape huddled against the wall. At first, my brain chose furniture. Then the angle of it betrayed me. A figure, crumpled, wrapped in the color of time. Skin collapsed into the idea of skin, bones like careful punctuation beneath it all. I froze. The world narrowed to the thud in my throat and a draft whistling through a cracked window. My hand found the wall, cool and gritty. My mouth tasted like pennies. I took one slow step back, then another until the door waited behind me like scents I had abandoned. The body had been there for years, alone, watching the house lose to weather. I should have run. I should have called the police from the sidewalk. Instead, I stared and knew, somehow, that the story I'd tell myself about my life was about to change shape. What exactly had that house been keeping? And why did it feel like it knew my name? My name is Maya Ellis, and for a living, I collect other people's lives. Not in jars or glass cases, though sometimes it feels that way, but in acid-free boxes at the Multnomah County Archive, where paper acquires the gravity of scripture. I'm the person who labels your grandmother's postcards, your father's service discharge papers, the receipt from the hardware store that proves a house was real. I love the way a scrawl can outlast a person, how a shopping list can put you in a kitchen 30 years ago. It's proof that we were here. It's proof that we had errands. I'm 31, old enough for my knees to notice rain, young enough to pretend I'll sleep better next week. I rent a second-floor apartment off Hawthorne with thin walls and a view of a maple that never learned moderation. My mornings smell like coffee and the damp wool of my pea coat. My nights sound like my upstairs neighbor's blunder. If I'm being honest, the quiet between those things has always made me itch.
I grew up mostly with my mother, Nora, who taught middle school English until she didn't. She married Ray when I was 11, a man who could fix anything as long as it didn't talk back. He worked construction then, restoration later, old houses, reclamation, that sort of noble work. He smelled like cedar sawdust and a stubborn brand of beer. When he came home, every room learned to measure itself. He wasn't cruel, he was exacting. I learned to stack plates a certain way and put my shoes by the door in a line. I learned to cook eggs without crowding the pan. I learned the quiet tone my mother used when she didn't want a small thing to tumble into something larger. My father, Caleb, was a story we didn't tell. He left when I was 8 with a suitcase that didn't look full. Mom said it was complicated. Ray said men like that don't finish things. I remember my father's hands more than his face. Long fingers, a little ink on the side of the left one like he'd pressed it to a fresh letter before it dried. Sometimes I imagine he's living in a warm town that does rain like an event, not a fact, and that he owns 2 dogs with tragic underbites. Mostly I imagine nothing. Imagining is a job. I try to leave work at work. The house, locals called it the Hawthorne House because no one could remember its real name, sat at the end of a block that never quite decided if it wanted to be businesses or homes. Every decade left its mark: a faded mural of a salmon, a barber pole that didn't spin anymore, a dentist's office that had replaced a living room. The Hawthorne House belonged to a different Portland, a version with corsets and coal soot and a belief that if you built something heavy enough, it might keep your life from blowing away. City records said it was built in 1894 by a widow named Vera Glassell, who took in boarders and ran a tea room that was probably less polite than it sounded. My job put me near it. When you work at an archive, you start recognizing buildings the way birders recognize birds, silhouettes, roof lines, the way a porch settles under a century of feet. I knew the Hawthorne House's old tax lots, its water bills, its first permit to run electrical wire through walls used to candlelight. I also knew the fire code citations that accumulated like parking tickets no one ever intends to pay. 10 years ago, there had been a small fire in a back hall. The city boarded it tighter. It sat like that waiting, while developers circled with patient smiles. I never went in. Not once. I have rules I obey that no one gave me. I don't climb fences. I don't cross taped doors. I don't step into stories I can't file. That day with the open gate, the rule fizzled like wet kindling. Maybe I was lonely. Maybe I was braver than I'd been letting myself be. Maybe I was tired of honoring other people's ghosts while ignoring my own. I texted Mom most days before dinner. Alive, I'd write. She'd send a heart and a photo of whatever Ray was over-seasoning. She still lived in the ranch house in Lentz, the one Ray had remodeled aggressively. Potlights, an island that begged for a party we never had. We mostly avoided the subject of my father. We also avoided the subject of Ray, except in recipes. What I'm trying to say is, 1, I'm not an adventurer, and 2, that house felt like a dare, exactly calibrated to my particular defects. The open gate made the decision look like it already belonged to me. One thing I've learned handling old paper: secrets become heavy with time. They can bend a person around them. They can warp a house. When I stood in that kitchen smelling damp plaster and metal, when I saw the corner of a jacket or blanket and the architecture beneath it that used to be a person, I understood a different definition of weight. My hand shook. My throat went tight. The cold in the house was the kind that slides under clothes, a lake kind of cold. Outside, the muted growl of a bus made the air feel briefly normal. Inside, my heart had switched to a new meter. I didn't scream. I don't think I could have. I did what my training and my wiring agreed on. I took one photo from the doorway so I could make the call without sounding like a teenager on a dare. Then I stepped outside where the air felt thicker with life and dialed 911 with a hand that knew where the numbers lived without looking. The dispatcher's voice was crisp and flat, like good paper. Is the person responsive? No, I said and swallowed. No, they've been dead a long time. Are you in danger? No, I said, and looked at the open gate as if it had an opinion. She said, stay on the line. What's your name? I told her. I told her the address. I told her I'd wait by the curb because inside the house felt like a confession I wasn't ready to hear. If the past is a room, who gets to hold the key? And why was mine suddenly in my hand?
2 police cruisers arrived with the kind of speed that says 2 things at once. We've been here before, and we hope we never have to come back. Blue lights washed the house pale. A neighbor watched from behind a curtain like a cat in witness protection. I wrapped my arms around myself despite my coat. The air smelled like wet leaves and exhaust. A woman detective in a navy beanie and a jacket that had seen more weather than I ever will ducked under the caution tape they'd strung in a generous rectangle. She introduced herself as Detective Serena Park. Her voice had that low, careful patience reserved for skittish dogs and witnesses who might bolt. You the caller? She asked. Yes, I said. I work at the county archive. I walked this way. The gate was open. You go inside? Just the kitchen. The door was unlocked. I didn't touch. I looked at my hands, dumbly, as if they would volunteer their sins. Okay, she said. You did right calling. She angled her head toward the house. Let's keep you out here. CSU's en route. Through the open door, I could see a scrape of the room, the stripes of light. It looked smaller with uniforms in it, like memories do after you say them out loud. The young officer at the threshold looked like a kid who had to pretend the mask fit. He pulled it tighter over his nose and stepped careful. Detective Park asked me the questions that, and I say this with affection and alarm, live in her bones now. What time did you arrive? Why this way? Did you see anyone leave? Did you hear anything? You'd think answers would come snap clean. They don't. Everything looked soft at the edges, like I'd woken mid-movie. I told her my name again. Maya Ellis, I said, and watched something flicker behind her expression. Not recognition. Not yet. A tab opened in her head she'd returned to. CSU did their careful ballet. The hush of booties over old wood, the zipper whisper of a kit opening, a camera's soft tick. The smell of latex and sanitizer rode the draft. Time did the thing I hate where it steps into another room without you. Female, someone called, voice neutral as a ledger. Early 20s, give or take. The word should have made the room tilt. Instead, a steadiness rolled through me that felt like dehydration tastes. Female, I don't know why my brain had assumed he. Maybe because old houses keep patriarchs like trophies. Maybe because fear puts a male outline on shadows. Detective Park returned to me, beanie damp with the first polite rain. You said you work at the archive, she said. You familiar with this house? Only on paper, I said. We have records, tax, permits, old photos. I recognized the porch from a photo in 1912. There was a tea room. There was a rumor. About what? Her pencil moved like a small animal. That during the Depression, the owner took in girls, teenagers with nowhere to go. Boarders, they were called then. I shrugged a little. It could be town romance. The city loves its own legends. She nodded. Legends don't bury bodies. She looked past me toward the tape and the slow motion inside. Her face didn't change, but something about her attention shifted, like a camera refocusing. You have family here? She asked, casual like weather. My mom, my stepdad, Lentz. Your dad? Left when I was 8. The sentence felt tannic in my mouth. She made a quiet note. I'm going to need you to stick around for a more formal statement, and we'll probably ask you back in to walk us through where you stepped, okay? I said yes because no would have sounded like a luxury I couldn't afford. I watched the doorway, the light, the careful hands. The rain began politely, a sprinkle that made the air smell like itself again. Sirens cried somewhere else. A crow on the telephone wire barked like it had an opinion about law enforcement. Then a CSU tech stepped out holding a sealed evidence bag. Inside lay a small pendant on a chain. Tarnished, oval, a bird etched into its face. A heron, long-legged,
beak down like a pencil poised. My breath snagged. My father used to carve birds into scrap wood at the kitchen table while my mom graded papers. Wrens, hawks, an egret that leaned forward like it wanted to listen. He'd made me a heron when I was 7. It sat on my bookshelf until we moved and didn't make the box. When you're a kid, you think you'll see things again because you saw them once. Familiar? Detective Park asked. Her tone said, tread light. It looks like something from the Saturday market. A lot of artists do birds. She watched my face like I was the scene. We'll run it. She didn't say we'll run it for prints because time had sanded this thing to ghost. She didn't say DNA because metal doesn't keep that. She didn't say, do you recognize it again? She didn't have to. The feather of recognition had already startled my ribs. I need to call my mother, I heard myself say, though I didn't know why that felt like urgency. Maybe I wanted her to tell me to come home and heat soup, that the world would resume its acceptable size. Use my car, Detective Park said, and led me to a sedan with the faint smell of coffee and lemon wipes. I called Mom. The line rang twice, then her voice thin with speakerphone filled the car. Hey, kiddo. Everything okay? Not really, I said, and told her where I was. Silence. Then too quickly, Maya, get out of there. It's a crime scene, I said, and tried to laugh like that made it safe. Just don't touch anything, she said. Promise me. I won't, I said. Mom, did you ever go in this house back when you were young? A breath, a small, careful sound. Everyone went in that house, she said like a line rehearsed long ago. I have to run. Call me when you're home. The line clicked. The lemon in the air suddenly smelled like something trying too hard. Detective Park watched me over the roof of the car with a look that said she'd heard my side and the silence on the other too. Why does a simple pendant pull an old thread? And who knots it so tight we can't breathe? Sleep that night was a hallway with too many doors. Every time I picked one, I found a room where the wallpaper curled. My phone kept lighting with the kind of messages that begin with, "Are you okay?" and end with question marks shaped like hands. News travels fast when it wears a siren. By morning, the story was a 3-paragraph article on a local site, remains found in abandoned East Side home. Words like possible homicide and historic structure sat next to each other like they belonged. No names, no age. The photos showed tape flapping, a cop's shoulder, a house that looked like it had given up. The comments were the usual. Ghosts, bad kids, developers, city council. Portland used to be better. Everyone is an expert when the facts are small. Detective Park called at 10. We're still working the scene, she said. I'd like you to come by this afternoon. Walk me through your steps, then I want you in the archive with me. With you? I blinked at my reflection in the kettle. Looking for what? Roots, she said. Houses don't grow bodies in a vacuum. At the scene, I pointed to the places my feet had learned too quickly. Kitchen, back hall, a doorway I didn't cross. The text photographed my sneakers like they mattered. The house felt different with daylight that had decided to participate. Dust motes hung like lazy stars. From somewhere upstairs, a drip made a patient metronome. The remains, were gone now, taken away under rain-spotted plastic into the sort of van we pretend not to see. In the archive, Detective Park and I sat at a table that had made peace with coffee rings. The room smelled like paper and time and the citrus cleaner our facilities guy favored on Fridays. I pulled boxes like I was dealing a card game. Hawthorne House, permits. Glassell, Vera, personal. East Side Historic Surveys. Park's beanie came off. Her hair was pressed flat in a line that made me want to smooth it, which I didn't. She opened a legal pad to a fresh page. Her handwriting was small and decisive. I showed her the 1894 permit with Vera's careful script, the 1912 photograph of the tea room with plates stacked like moons, the 1948 letter from a tenant complaining about drafts in the parlor that make a woman's bones ache. We skimmed the 1976 inspection report that used substandard and deferred maintenance the way some people use later in a fight. Then the 1990s, A cluster of notices in quick succession: code violations, neighbor complaints, anonymous tip lines. Then a permit in 1997 submitted by a nonprofit called Upstreet, signing a lease as a transitional living program for young women. The signature belonged to an Elliot Kavanaugh, director. The name jammed my breath a beat. Kavanaugh Development now sat on half the cranes in the city. He'd gone from helping the houseless speeches to ribbon cuttings for luxury microlofts with names like The Thicket. Upstreet, Detective Park read. How long? 3 years, I said, flipping pages. Then funding dried up. Property owner died. Probate took forever. My finger landed on a photocopied flyer. A grainy photo of the house, the words, Community Open House, in an optimistic font. 2 women on the porch, heads bent together. One looked painfully familiar the longer I stared. My mother at 20, hair longer, mouth softer. My stomach did that small elevator drop. The air thinned. I held the paper like it had heat. That's my mom, I said, barely, and passed it across. Park's pencil paused mid-mark. Nora Ellis, she said, less a question than a new file tab. She lived there? Volunteered, I said, hearing how thin the word sounded. She never told me. Park nodded like someone who hadn't been told a lot of important things. We'll want to talk to her, she said, and I felt the sentence in my teeth. We kept digging. Park asked for anything after 2010. I slid a box closer. 10 years ago, a small fire reported in the rear hall. Cause undetermined. Work contracted to North Line Redevelopment. My stomach made a colder dip. That was Ray's company, the one he bragged about finally working with the big boys. Park watched me read the name. Your stepfather, she said. Yeah, I said, voice in a lower register I didn't order. They board up half the old stuff in this town, stabilize roofs for demos, tear out mold. It's honest work. I heard the defense I didn't believe. She wrote Ray Porter, Northline, in her neat script like she was drawing a small circle around a small match. We'll talk to him too, she said. I called my mother from the hall because I couldn't hold all that in my lap and sit quietly across from someone whose job is to notice when you flinch. Mom answered on the second ring. Her voice had tea in it. Hey, honey. Did you live at the Hawthorne house? I asked, skipping hello, choosing surgical. Silence. I could almost hear her choose which drawer in her head to open. Volunteer, she said. We all did. There were girls who needed, she exhaled. I dropped by, brought casseroles, a teacher thing. Your picture is on a flyer with another woman. June, she said, and the name slid out like it had been waiting. June Whitaker. She ran the place with Elliot. She was the reason it worked. Did you keep in touch? People drift, and I felt the ripples of that small word. Mom, the body is a young woman, early 20s. They think she's been there about a decade. I heard the sound of her hand finding the counter. Maya! Detective Park wants to talk to you. No, she said too fast. Then softer. I mean, of course, yes, yes. I pictured her pressing fingers to her eyelids the way she does when a migraine prowls. Come by tonight? After work. Mom? Why didn't you ever tell me about the house? She took a breath big enough to lift sound. Because leaving things alone was how some of us survived, she said, not unkindly. Please come by. I went back into the archive and felt the weight of my keys in my pocket, absurdly heavy for what they were. Detective Park glanced up, measured my face, and let me sit with my silence. We combed through one last folder labeled 2013, Fire, Board Up, and found a purchase order. Lumber, fasteners, smoke alarms. The signature at the bottom was Ray's. His pen left a deep indent. On the way out, Park said, We'll pull missing person files from 2010 to 2015. That window fits the preliminary scene. If a young woman went missing and didn't leave the state, we'll know. And if she did leave and her body didn't? Park held the door for me against the afternoon wind. The metal handle felt like ice. Then we learn who helped her stay, she said. Outside, the sky had found a slightly darker gray to try on. A gust lifted a curl of old posters from a telephone pole, the glue letting go with a papery sigh. What else exactly did my mother not say? And what did my stepfather sign his name to besides lumber?
By lunchtime the next day, Detective Parks called with a voice that carried both caffeine and restraint. Prelim from the ME, she said. Female, estimated 19 to 22. Time since death, 12 to 13 years. No immediate ID, no wallet, no phone. We did find a small hair clip under the baseboard, turquoise plastic, cheap, and a scrap of a bus schedule in a pocket, line 14. S.E. Foster, I said without meaning to. The map lived in my mouth. Good, she said. You know your buses. Look, the body isn't your mother's June. She let that exhale sit. June Whitaker died in 2009. Cancer. Obituaries in the Oregonian. I opened a tab and found it while we were still on the phone. A small photo, June with a scarf, eyes kind enough to make you believe her casseroles had magic. I felt a guilt that wasn't logical. Like I'd wanted the dead to be familiar to make it easier to care. Upstreet shut down right after, Park went on. Kavanaugh pivoted to development. He's got 3 LLCs since. We're pulling the board up permits for the fire year. Your stepfather's name is on more than a signature or two. A small cold pooled in my stomach. How many? Enough that I'll be at his office this afternoon, she said. I'd like you at your mother's. The heron pendant nagged the corner of my mind like a loose thread. Any luck on the jewelry? I asked. Common craft stall stuff, she said. Saturday market vendors sold hundreds that year. Not traceable. Of course, I wanted an object to make a straight line between then and now. Objects don't love us back. At my mother's that evening, the house smelled like onions and the good olive oil she buys when she thinks she's doing something special. The living room wore its usual soft lamps. The island Ray had installed demanded the center, like a guest who turns every story toward himself. Mom looked smaller than her sweater. Her hair had more silver than last month. She made tea as a reflex to silence. I didn't live there, she said before I sat, at the Hawthorne house. I helped. We were all young and got kindness could fix what money and systems broke. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Not angry, just young again in a way that embarrassed me. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Steam wet her bangs. Because some of the girls who came through, she shook her head. They weren't mine to talk about. Do you remember any names? Detective Park asked gently from the armchair where she sat too big for the furniture and too polite to notice. Mom looked at her, then at me, then at the steam as if it could arrange itself into an answer. Lark, she said finally. A girl named Lark. She was sharp and soft in turns. She wanted to be a baker. She could make biscuits with no recipe. We all thought... She stopped. She left suddenly. It upset June. What year? Park asked. 2013, Mom said slowly, placing the number between us. It was spring, because I remember everything smelled like damp lilacs. Do you have a last name? Park asked. Mom closed her eyes briefly. I don't, she said, and the shame in it made me want to climb through time and hand her a pen. Park nodded, writing Lark 2013 biscuits in her neat print, underlining it like a prayer. We'll run it. Then she said, Mrs. Ellis, did you know a man named Elliot Kavanaugh well? Mom's mouth tightened. Well enough, she said. He was good at rooms. He made donors feel like the world would be kinder if they just wrote a bigger check. He made us feel like our casseroles mattered. Did he ever... She paused, selected a word like a tool from a tray. Use the house after the program ended. Mom's eyes did a quick, tired dance I recognized as a person searching her inventory for contradictions. I don't know, she said. I was very busy that year.
Ray came home halfway through, his boots thudding amicably. He smelled like wet pine and the stubborn beer. He saw Detective Park, straightened like his spine remembered a rule. "Officer," he said. "Detective," she corrected. "Mr. Porter, I'd like to ask about a board-up you supervised in 2013. Hawthorne House." Ray wiped his hands on a towel like a man preparing to be reasonable. "Sure. Sad old place. Kids had been getting in. We made it safe." His eyes flicked to me, to Mom, back to Park. "Why?" "There was a small fire," Park said. "You signed the permit." "Like 100 others?" he said with a half-laugh. "Ma'am, are we really doing this? I seal holes for a living." Park's face remained not impressed, not angry. "We're doing this," she said. "Did you ever meet anyone in the house after your crew finished?" "No," he said quickly. "Why would I?" "Because sometimes people use boarded structures as private space. No prying eyes." Ray's jaw twitched. He set the towel down very carefully. "We did the job, that's all." Park nodded like she'd been handed an index card with nothing on it, and filed it anyway. "We'll be in touch." And she stood. Ray stood too, that old reflex, and I saw the muscle in his forearm jump. I hadn't noticed that in years. After she left, the house went quiet in the way rooms do after someone takes a certain kind of oxygen with them. Mom busied her hands with plates we didn't need. Ray, turning to me, "You didn't tell her about your father, did you?" he asked, too easy. "What about him?" I said. He smirked a little. "He loved old houses. He used to sneak into them. Be a shame if the police thought that ran in the family." I stared at him so hard, my eyes hurt. "I walked through an open door, Ray," I said. "I called 911. That's the opposite of your kind of brave." His smile thinned. "Careful," he said softly. The kettle clicked off. The kitchen smelled like onion and tension. Mom pressed her fingers to her forehead. I suddenly wanted my apartment with its blender upstairs and its maple that couldn't stop. If a body is a fact, why does every man who has ever signed a permit act like it's a rumor?
The week that followed frayed at the edges. The house got its own news cycle. Kavanaugh issued a statement about honoring history while building the future, which in developer means don't ask me for keys. A preservation group petitioned to halt demolition permits until human remains are identified and honored. Someone left grocery store daisies at the fence. Someone else stole them. The internet played its least favorite game, Guess the Dead. At work, I buried myself in microfilm and maps. My fingertips stayed black with old ink no sink could convince to leave. Detective Park stopped by between interviews, filling a yellow pad with small, fierce handwriting. She said little, just, "We're getting closer," in a tone I believed because I wanted to. We pulled missing persons. There were more than you think. So many girls nobody stayed mad about long enough. Names that felt like weather. The year 2013 held 5 that fit. Park made a grid. First name, last name, age, last seen, notes. L-A-R-K went at the bottom with a question mark, underlined. I scanned case files as if the paper itself might exhale a secret. 2 things happened on Wednesday that made the world lurch. The first, a DM from an account with no posts and 3 numbers in the handle. "Leave the house alone. Some things stink when you stir them." I screenshotted, sent to Park, blocked, then lay on my couch and listened to my neighbor make a smoothie with a blender that sounded like a small plane. The second, a man in a reflective vest knocked on my apartment door at 7 p.m. when evening had the color of old denim. "Notification," he said, holding out a paper. "Abatement. Interior hazard. Scheduled entry Friday." The paper wore the city seal like a rubber stamp, and a signature of a supervisor I knew by name from permit summaries. My pulse did that bird thing. I thanked him and smiled like a person who cooperates with official paper. When he left, I called Park. "They're moving," she said. "We asked for hold, but developers know which strings not. Do not go in there, Maya." "I wasn't going to," I lied. "Mean it," she said. I meant it at the time. Then Thursday, a volunteer from the preservation group, an older woman with a voice that had been trained by PTA meetings in choir, stopped by the archive. "We were told someone from your office looked over the house's probate," she said, bending vowels in that particular Portland way. I nodded. I did. She put a neat folder on the table like a church offering. "We found this in a desk donated to our fundraiser last year. Came from the Kavanaugh building downtown. Must have slipped into a drawer. Can you look?" Her eyes glinted with righteous mischief of someone who indeed stole something for the public good. Inside, a ledger, handwritten, clean block letters, dates and initials, 2012, 2014. Payments like cash, Upstreet Storage, and Board Up, HH, off book. Initials RP appeared enough times to make my stomach tighten. Ray Porter. Another set EK punctuated entries, next to a spring 2013 date. Lark. Advance. $300. I had to sit down. The chair squeaked in a small, embarrassed way. "Is this useful?" she asked, half proud, half afraid. "Yes," I said. My mouth tasted salt. "Can I keep it?" she said, not needing me to break the rules out loud. I photographed every page, the way you pet a sleeping dog, cautious, grateful. I called Park. She said good, like a person who had just watched a door unlock. Then I did what I promised 24 hours earlier I wouldn't. I went to the house before dawn Friday, when the light has that exhausted gray, when even birds reconsider their contract. I told myself I'd leave the ledger with a note in the kitchen that evidence belongs to places where it can be counted. In truth, I wanted inside one more time before men and vests carved it into safe chunks. The chain-link gate was zip-tied, but years taught me zip ties are just stubborn string. I used a key, not meant for this keyhole, to lever a gap. The air tasted like rain that couldn't commit. The boards on the back door were new and proud, the screw heads still shiny, but the kitchen window's latch had been broken since the Clinton administration. I slid it up with a careful shove. My palms felt the grain of the frame, damp and gritty. I swung a leg over the sill and put my foot on the counter, where a bug scurried like a thought you don't want. Inside, the damp felt familiar. My breath clouded briefly in front of me. I placed the ledger on the counter and snapped a photo with the timestamp visible. I texted it to Park and typed, "Left on site. I'm out." I meant to mean it. Then the house spoke. Not in words, don't worry, I haven't become that person, but in a draft that smelled unlike the rest. Not wet wood, not dust. Something stale, paper dry, like the inside of an old suitcase. It came from the back hall near the narrow door I hadn't opened last time. Look, I know the rules. I enforce the rules for a living, but some stories yoke you like oxen, and my spine leaned the way the yoke wanted. I pressed the hall door. It opened with the resigned squeal of a thing that's been asked to perform for people who never tip. A steep, narrow stair fell away. Servant steps, the kind my knees hate. The air down there was a degree colder, a century older. I went down sideways, palm to the gritty wall. My light smeared the dark. At the bottom, a small room. The skeleton of shelves along one wall, a rusted sink, a concrete floor. Against the far wall, behind slumped cardboard boxes, a door. A small one, like a closet built as an afterthought. The draft came from the seam. The door had a simple latch. I lifted it. It stuck, then let go with a sound like a sigh. Inside, a crawl space no one mentioned on any plan. Dust coated the world like suede. My light hit rectangles stacked like bricks. Shoeboxes, hat boxes, a milk crate with cassette tapes. On top, a notebook wrapped in a grocery bag. I slid it out, coughing as the dust found my lungs. The notebook belonged to June Whittaker. Her handwriting was the tidy kind teachers covet, round loops, disciplined tails.
It held lists, groceries, chore rotations, names and chores beside them. It held recipes in a tone that believed anyone could feed 10 on $20 and a miracle. Then entries, short, tired, nightly sometimes weekly when her days ran long. April 2013. Lark worried. She says someone is waiting by the fence in a truck. He says it's for her own good. Talk to Elliot. He says he'll handle it. Don't like his tone. May, Ray came by with boards and 2 men. Didn't look me in the eye. Told me if I wanted the house safe, I should let them do their work and not ask questions. June, Lark left a note. She said back later, don't tell. Meaning by the kitchen door. She didn't come back. My hands shook. The edges of the page cut my fingers. I took photos of everything fast. The cassettes with dates, the notebook pages, even the dust. Then footsteps thudded above, not shy, not unsure. Men with the gait of people who believe doors are polite suggestions. I snapped the latch, killed my light, and flattened myself against the crawlspace wall, heart beating its own little alarm. Voices moved through the kitchen, the lower rhythm of Ray, the faster patter of a younger man. Grab the stuff in the hall. If it's paper, bag it. The city doesn't need to babysit history. They were here to erase. I should have called Park. My hand hovered over my phone for an eternity measured in 3 beats. Then I texted her one word, here, and dropped a pin I prayed would be brave enough. Ray's boots thunked down the servants' stairs. He stopped at the bottom, the sound of a lighter. The sharp scent of butane sliced the damp. God, this place could have been good. He moved toward the small door. The latch shadow stole across the floor. He lifted it. When the person who taught you to stack plates opens the door to your hiding place, what part of you decides to become a new person?
He opened the door, and in that sliver of light, our faces knew each other. Our lives doubled. Ray's eyes went wide, then narrow, then slat. He looked older than yesterday, jaw tight, hair gone drier gray. The lighter clicked shut like a verdict. "Maya," he said, and the way he said my name made the floor tilt. "What are you doing?" "Leaving," I said, and my voice surprised me by not shaking. I touched June's notebook under my coat like a worm animal. He stared at the bulge. "You don't want to do that," he said, conversational, like we were in the cereal aisle. Upstairs, the younger man called, "Boss?" "Hold on," Ray said, eyes still on me. The word boss hung between us like poor lighting. I had the choice then, the one where you decide whether you're the kind of person who obeys a tone or the kind that reroutes it. I could hand him the book, pretend I hadn't seen the page where his name sat inside the margin of a woman's worry. I could back up those steep stairs, apologize for curiosity like it's a disease. I could let the house keep it secret until men in vests and masks vacuum it up and label it debris. Or I could run through the small banana peel of fear and make a mess in the name of someday sleeping. Detective Park has my location. She'll be here in 2 minutes. Ray's laugh was quiet and incredulous. "You think she moves that fast for paper?" I stepped out, closing the crawlspace door behind me with a firm click. The small room crowded with our breath. The smell of butane lingered like a dumb idea. The younger man called again. His voice had a hitch to it now. Ray took one small step forward, I took one backward, the wall at my shoulder. I felt the grit press through my coat into my shoulder blade. "I'm walking out," I said. "Either we both walk, or the police explain to you why I'm allowed." "Allowed," he repeated, like tasting a word he didn't order. His eyes dropped to the notebook. "What do you think that is, Maya? A confession?" "It's recipes and chores. You're making drama because you like its flavor." I thought of June's tidy hand. Lark worried. I thought of a turquoise hair clip. I thought of Mom's soft mouth saying biscuits. I think it's a record. And records don't lie. People do. We stared at each other long enough for the sound of a siren to thread through the damp from a distance. A small, insistent animal coming closer. Ray's jaw flickered. He turned away first, which I'll never forget, because some battles are about sequence. Go, he said, not looking at me. And tell your detective she'll need a warrant for my tools. I went. Up the servant stairs, through the kitchen, out the back hall, where a draft licked my ankles. The yard's grass clutched my jeans. The air tasted like a storm considering its options. At the gate, I looked back once. Ray stood in the doorway, a silhouette, small in the wide mouth of the house. A man people once called useful. Detective parked sedan fishtailed a little into the alley. She stepped out, already moving. You okay? She asked, eye scanning for tears or breaks. I handed her the notebook. My hands shook now that they were allowed. June kept records, and she wrote his name. I nodded towards the house. He's with someone. And he has a lighter. Park's jaw reset. She said, "Get in the car." Then she spoke into her radio like she had been waiting to use that tone. If you give your fear a job, will it finally let you sleep, or will it ask for a raise?
Everything that followed happened fast and also took a year. Officers swept the house with the kind of efficient choreography that looks calm and is not. Ray's younger employee came out first, blinking like a raccoon whose trash can just got kicked. His name was Caleb, which made the world tilt a degree in the wrong direction. Seeing my father's name on a stranger's badge felt like a magic trick done sloppy. They cuffed him lately. He kept saying, "I didn't know," which is everyone's favorite line until it isn't. Ray waffed out next, hands visible, jaw set against a story he wasn't going to like. Park read him rights with the voice of a woman who believes in instruction manuals. He looked at me once, no plea, no heat, just a small surprised grief like discovering a leak in a room you just repainted. Then they put him in the back of a car that had transported better men and worse. The house exhaled acetone and old wood. A city truck rolled up with cones and men in heavier vests. A neighbor in pajama pants filmed with a phone. This guy found a new gray that looked almost pearl from a certain angle. I stood next to Park Sidion and tried to remember how to put my hands in my pockets like a person. "Notebook strong," Park said, flipping through June's tidy evidence, photographing every page. The date's clean, the name's sparse, but crucial. "We'll get a warrant for Ray's shop in the North Lane office. The ledger you left me? That's a spine." She tapped the page where Lark/advance $300 sat like a small, sharp thorn. This makes it a skeleton. My mother arrived 10 minutes later, hair not brushed, sweater on inside out. She saw the cars and folded into herself before walking faster than I've ever seen. "Maya," she said, hands finding my arms like she was confirming I was an outline someone didn't fill in wrong. "What happened?" "Ray's under arrest," I said, discovering the dryness of the mobiles. "He was in the house with a lighter. June kept a notebook." Mom closed her eyes, then opened them again like a swimmer surfacing. "Of course he did," she whispered. Her gaze darted to Park. "Detective, did you find anything about Lark?" Parks mounted the small not smile that means news isn't not bad. "We think we have her," she said. "Body matches the window, the hair clip. We'll need DNA to confirm. I'm sorry." My mother's palm found her own sternum. She nodded as if someone had asked if she wanted more tea. "She could make biscuits," she said, and went quiet in a way I envied. "Mrs. Ellis," Ark said gently. "Did Lark have a last name?" Mom stared at the house, her shoulders squared in a familiar teacherly way, the one that says, "We will proceed through this together, even if only one of us believes it."
She didn't use one, she said, but once she got a letter, junk mail probably, addressed to Ruby Porter. She laughed and said, "Wrong girl." She tore it up. I didn't pry. Mom swallowed. I thought I was being kind. The name landed like a dropped plate. Porter. Ray's name. The air between my mother and me filled with a million small questions that all argued about their place in line. Ray had a daughter, I asked, hearing how high my voice went. And you didn't... We were not a house for saying, Mom said. We were a house for folding towels smoothly. She looked at me the way people look at photos of themselves and try to find kindness for the person in it. I thought I could make a life by not looking at the edges, she said. I thought I could protect you that way. You did, I said, and meant the version of the truth I could hold in that minute. We drank tea that got cold. We didn't turn on the TV. The blender upstairs didn't run because I wasn't upstairs. At 11 p.m., Park texted, "We found records at Kavanaugh's office. Payments to RP labeled as security and special board up. We also found emails. He knew Ruby. He funded Upstreet, kept a key, kept a calendar. He's in custody." Then, "You okay?" I wrote, "Not yet, but thank you." She sent a single check mark, which felt like a hand on a shoulder in a hallway too bright. What do you do with a house that taught you to keep quiet when all it wants now is to be loud?
Trials are not like TV unless you mean how long the ad breaks feel. Months moved, the kind of months that lay down a layer of silt on your life. The DA decided to charge Ray with manslaughter 2 and abuse of a corpse. Kavanaugh got obstruction, tampering with evidence, and a count with the word coercion heavy in it. There were pleas on the table and statements and a dozen legal words wearing ties. Ruby's remains were identified through DNA from a half-sister in Idaho I didn't know existed and felt ashamed for not wanting to know. The packet from the ME arrived with more sterile words than anyone should ever have to read. The day I testified, the courthouse smelled like coffee burned an hour too long. I wore a navy dress that didn't belong to me. It belonged to someone who testifies, and shoes that made a dignified sound on tile. Detective Park nodded to me in the hall with that small economy of gesture I'd come to count on. My mother squeezed my hand hard enough to make a new imprint. On the stand, the prosecutor asked me to speak like a map. I did. The gate, the kitchen, the smell, the stripe of light, the pendant with the heron, June's notebook. Yes, it was in her hand. No, I hadn't altered it. The ledger. Yes, it came to me through a preservationist. Yes, I knew this was unorthodox. Yes, I turned it over. The crawl space, the door, Ray, the lighter. My voice held even when my breath felt like a short dog on a long leash. The defense attorney asked me to be unreasonable. He wanted me to say, houses confuse us. He wanted me to say paper lies if the person who wrote it wanted something. He wanted my father's leaving to mean I look for him everywhere, even where he isn't. Isn't it true, he said, too smooth, that you entered an unsafe structure illegally because you have a fascination with old buildings you inherited from your absent father? I entered to leave a ledger and to retrieve proof before men burned it. The judge called for order not because I raised my voice, but because it changed shape. Ray didn't look at me, which hurt more than if he had. Kavanaugh looked at everyone like they were disappointing contractors. When the prosecutor put June's notebook on the evidence cart, something like grief flickered across his face, maybe for the days when he could write checks and be thanked as a hero. He had been a man who believed his signature improved rooms. The tape, yes, there was tape. One of the cassettes from the crate survived by accident, wedged in the middle like a kidney stone. The DA had it digitized. In the courtroom, the tinny sound came through speakers. June's voice, tired but clear, leaving a message on a machine that no one checked in time. "Elliot, you can't keep coming by unannounced. The girls preserve structure, not drop-ins. Lark says you told her she's special, that you'll get her a job. Please don't make promises you can't keep. And stop meeting her by the back door, use the front like everyone else." The date stamp put it 3 days before Lark. Ruby disappeared. It wasn't the smoking gun, it was smoke that carried a scent and a stain. It made the air in the room different. It made Kavanaugh flinch just enough to confirm the person inside the suit existed. The verdicts came like weather forecasts, delivered in a tone that didn't know our names. Ray took the plea, manslaughter 2, 7 years with more for the handling after. Kavanaugh fought and lost on tampering and coercion, not enough to satisfy my petty heart, but enough to make his head bow for a second. Ruby's name was said out loud more times in 1 hour than in 10 years. The judge requested sensitivity in press coverage. The press ignored that, mostly. Outside, cameras gathered like crows.
Park put a hand near my elbow without touching me, guiding me past microphones. My mother kept her chin high and her eyes on the exit sign like it was a star. Ray's lawyer said some things about tragedy and complex grief. Kavanaugh didn't speak. He practiced a new expression that hadn't found a home yet. In the car, my mother family cried, the hiccuping sobs of a person whose dam has been decorative for years. I pulled over and put my forehead to hers, which is the only way I know to remind two bodies they share a world. We didn't say I'm sorry because it wasn't for each other. We said I know until the phrase became a rope. When justice arrives in pieces, who teaches you how to hold them without cutting your hands?
The city postponed demolition. The preservation group won a partial victory. A memorial garden where the Hawthorne house stood. The front steps stabilized and left like a mouth mid-sentence. They placed a plaque with Ruby's name and the dates we could give. People left flowers and notes and sometimes a bus pass. Someone knitted a turquoise hair clip and tied it to the fence. And that made me cry in the middle of a weekday. Mom and I cleaned out closets. Grief makes you want to handle objects, to give purpose to hands. We found my father's heron carving wrapped in a towel in a box marked Winter. I don't know if Mom had meant to give it back or if it had just been traveling with us like a stowaway. I put it on my bookshelf like I could apologize to Wood. I wrote my father a letter and didn't send it, which is another kind of sending. Detective Park came by the archive once a week for a month, as if the habit of looking at paper with me could make us both better. She landed once on an 1897 letter from Vera Glassell to her sister about leaks and the cost of coal and how the boarders sing too late. But I cannot bear to stop them because I hear the world trying to under them and figure a song is a ladder. Park didn't say anything for a while. Then she folded the photocopy like it had earned being carried. The day we planted the first perennials at the memorial, the sky tried on blue for an hour. Kids chalked flowers on the sidewalk. The preservation lady orchestrated volunteers with the joy of a general sending soup. My mother taught a teenager how to tamp soil around roots like she was explaining a sonnet. I set a small metal Harriman in the corner of the bed, a silly thing, a private thing. It caught a line of sun and pretended to be important. I still walk by the site after work. The air there smells like damp dirt and rosemary. The steps sit stubborn, a place to think and sometimes to be looked at. People don't sprint by as much. They slow. They read the plaque out loud. They say the name like they were given it for safekeeping. Maybe that's what we owe the dead, to say their names in air that remembers how to be gentle.
I thought the secret of the old house would be a single dark thing I could pull into light and be done with. I thought it would be punishment or absolution. Instead, it was a long chain of ordinary choices. Board this up, sign here, don't ask, don't look. That, over time, tied a knot around a girl and left her there. I've learned this. Silence accumulates like dust. It looks harmless, almost pretty in the right light, but it smothers lungs all the same. We tell ourselves we're respecting privacy, when often we're protecting comfort. I'm not immune. I walked past that open gate 100 times in my life, both literal and otherwise. Paper saved us. June's tidy hand. A ledger someone forgot to lock in a drawer. A bus pass. A cheap hair clip. The words we leave become a map for the people who have to live after our choices. I think about Vera and her boarders singing too late, and how a house can be a kindness until it becomes a secret, and then a crime. When it rains now, and it will because Portland, I sometimes stand under the eave of the old steps and listen to the water find routes down. I try to be the kind of person who asks names and writes them down. I am not kind every day, but I am kinder. That will have to do. And if a stranger ever asks for help at my back door, I will show them the front and leave it open. The house kept its secret for years, but it didn't win. We said her name out loud and built a garden where the silence was. And some nights, if you stand on the steps, you can almost hear the singing start again.